Hi friends, let's see the app we are going to develop in the next couple of lessons. When you run this app, this is the main option screen. You will see a menu which is on a table view. So I can click on say employee options, then it will load this data, and all the employee data are loaded dynamically from a data source, right? And then I can click on employee, and then it's dynamically changing this page with that particular employee and the projects. If I go back and click another employee, you can see the same page is dynamically changing with that employee and the projects, which are all loaded dynamically. The images are also loaded dynamically from a data source, right? So it's different images loaded dynamically. And then I can delete employees. Let's say I can swipe and say delete, then it deletes the data, right? If not, I can click on edit and say if I want to delete something, click on this and click delete, right? And when I'm done, I can say done, right? And then further I can insert data dynamically. Let us say a section P and say Peter, for example, and click OK. So it all gets added dynamically, right? Then once I'm done with employees, I can go scroll down, right? And then I can go into department options, right? So department, and do the same thing for department, right? But it's very important that you have to make sure to look at the next couple of lectures in this on table views, that is part 1, 2, 3, etc., until we complete this app. It explains all the theory and the practical knowledge which you need to know about developing this app, right? Okay friends, we are very excited to show you how to develop this app practically, and let's do it now. Okay friends, so the following is the outcome of this part of the lesson. When you complete this part of the lesson, your app will look like this. Until you complete the other parts of the lesson, it will load a list of employees dynamically, right? And it will divide them into sections. But the difference of this and the previous lesson is, the previous lesson was using dynamic table view controllers, right? Whereas this lesson is using dynamic table view. So there's a difference, and just make sure to have look at till the end of the lesson. But after you complete this lesson, make sure to go and look at the next lessons in order to complete the full app demonstrated earlier. Hi friends, so this lesson is table views, dynamic content, UI table view part 1. Let's see what is inside this. This is going to be a very interesting session for you guys. So tools used will be Xcode version 11.4.1 for practicals and Apple Developer Docs for referencing. Prerequisite, you have to look at the following previous lessons on table view in Objective-C in this series, that is table view static content. Also you have to look at table views dynamic content, UI table view controller part 1 to 5. You have to look at some of the previous basic lessons in Objective-C in this series. So friends, in a previous session you learned that there are two approaches possible when it comes to creating table views. Just to recall it very quickly, one approach is using UITableView controller and the other one is using UITableView. So this first one, UITableView controller, we covered in our previous lessons, right? So those lessons were table views, dynamic content, UITableView controller part 1 to part 5, right? We already covered that. But in this lesson, we are going to cover the second point, which is using table UI table views, right? Now, just quickly to recap, the difference is, if you remember, just to recap, just like revision, the UI table view controller, what you did was you created a custom subclass of UI table view controller, right? And then you remembered we did that you must override the data source and delegate methods. We have so far done only data source. Delegates will be done after this lesson, right? And to fulfill your methods to fulfill your data, right? Your table with the data, especially the UI table data source protocol is what we have used so far, right? Then your table view delegate we'll be doing after this. Anyhow, in the previous lesson also you saw that the table view controllers already adapt the protocols and you need to manage your table views content, right? So the table view controllers already adapt the protocols that you need to manage your table view content, right? So what you had to do was just override the methods, right? You look at our previous lessons on that, right? But in this lesson we are going to focus on this part, which is UI table view. So if you read it here, you have to create a subclass of UI view controller and specify that it is conforming to the following protocols. right, which is UITableView data source protocol and UITableView delegate, and then also to override the data source and delegate methods. So the difference is when you use UITableView controllers, what we did was we created a custom subclass of UITableView controller, right, to write the methods. But when you are focusing on UI table views without the UI table view controller, right, here you have to create a subclass of UI view controller, right? So that's the difference. Here you will create a custom class of UI table view controller. Here you are creating custom class of UI view controller. But in both the approaches, you are adhering to these two protocols, right? This UI table data source and UI table view delegate protocols. Here also same, but the difference is here we are using a UI table view controller. Earlier, in the earlier case, we were using UITableView controller, but now in this lesson we are using UITableView. So once you finish it, you will see the difference, right? So we discussed this in a previous session, right? Have a look at it. Okay, so then in this session you will learn, as I said, using UITableView to display a list of employee names. Then use the UITableView data source protocol, right? Because you have to give the data, right? So then you will understand that UITableView does not already adapt this protocol, whereas the UITableView controller will already adapt, right? We saw it in the previous lesson. So as I said, you have to create a subclass of UIView controller and specify that it is conforming to the following protocols, and then also override data source and delegate methods required. So you have to adhere that you are going to confirm these protocols, and you have to override the methods under them, right? So especially override the data. In this lesson, we will be overriding the data source methods, right, to fulfill the data. And you will use the UITableView cells, and you will configure them, add images, add sections and titles, and you will use multidimensional arrays, NS arrays, to help you with this. So the lesson plan is we are doing practical demonstrations, and what we are doing is we are implementing the same exercise, the practical done in our previous session. The previous session before this one was table views, dynamic content, UITableView controller part 5, right? So we are doing the same thing, but this time using UITableViews rather than table view controllers, right? That is the difference, right? So we are focusing our lesson, this lesson is focusing on UITableViews. So we are doing the same thing what we did in UITableViews dynamic content, UITableView controller part 5, same practical we are implementing now using UITableViews, right? So let's start and let's do the practical for that, right? Let's do it now. So let's start Xcode and let's create a new project, right? Let's make a new project, file, new project, right? So let's create iOS single view app. Okay, let's give the product name as table views dynamic content UITableView part 1, right? Awesome. And then let's create it inside table views. Awesome, right? Okay, now first things first. Now in this case we are not going to use UITableView controllers, right? We are not going to use, so we are going to keep the basic view controller which we have, right? We are going to keep the basic one, right? And then we are going to add from the library, object library, we are going to add a table view, right? That's what we are focusing, not the table view controller, right? So you add a table view, right? You add it to the canvas, and let's put a label and let's put some constraints, right? So let me put a label also, right? Just put a label about this, and let's give some properties to the label. So let's do like this. I deleted the label. Let's put this to the entire screen, the table view, right? So I deleted the label because I'm going to put this to the entire screen, right? So I'm just going to put them into the corners. So I got a table view, right? Awesome, right? Let's run this immediately, right? So let's run and see what will happen when I have an empty table view, guys, right? So I got empty table view, and let's see the basic output first, right? So I have placed a table view, right? It's not a table view controller, right? And this is the empty table view. Awesome, right? You can see. Now what's next? let's see what's next. So what's next is, if you remember what we discussed in this lesson series, now you have to confirm to the two important protocols, right? One is UITableView data source protocol, and the next one is UITableView delegate protocol, right? So let's start with UITableView data source protocol, and after this we'll do exercises UITableView delegate protocol, right? So now to move forward, now first thing is I have to, where should I write them, right? Where should I write the methods to confirm to the UITableView data source protocol and to the UITableView delegate protocol? I'm referring to, okay, let me say I'm referring to this, right? So this one. So where can I confirm, right? To this UITableView data source and UITableView delegate protocol, right? So where do I have to write, right? Okay. So what I have to do first is, the first thing is, let's do two things, right? So let's uh, let's write for both, right? So let's start with this. Now the data source, right? The data source protocol and also the delegate. Let's do both, right? So what I'm telling is, okay, so what I did was I selected the table view, right? And I'm going to, from the property inspector, from the attribute inspector, right? I'm going to the let's see what comes, right? I'm going to the connections inspector, right? So when I go to the connections inspector, I can see the data source and the delegate methods, right? So data source is about filling the table with the data. Delegate is like methods like click event and stuff like that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write both, right? So what I'm telling is I'm clicking here, and while pressing the control key, I'm dragging it, hold on, right? So I did a mistake, so I'm going to remove it. Hold on, give me a second, right? So I deleted it because I just clicked it by mistake. So once again, I'm clicking on the data source and I'm dragging it to this to say my data source for this table view will be in this view controller, right? That's what I'm telling by doing this. I release it, right? So what I told is, okay, my data source, right? Uh, for the view for this table view is in my view controller. Then delegate is where you write the methods, right? Events. So I'm going to put that as well, right? Just to confirm to both of them. So I'm going to write a kind of a click event as well, right? So I'm going to say, okay, my delegate is also, I'm going to write inside the view controller. So what you said effectively is, right? What you told is, okay, in your table view, right? You are telling that your data source and the delegate is written in the view controller. So what is this view controller? If you look, this is the view controller, right? And what you said is, if you look at the let me go into this. If you look at the identity inspector of the view controller, right? Identity inspector of the view controller, it's mapped to a class, the view controller. So what you said by clicking the table view and going to the connections inspector, and what you dragged and said is, okay, this table view, right? This table views data source and delegate protocols are implemented in this view controller. In other words, if you look at the view controller is connected. If you look at the identity inspector, it's connected to a class called view controller, which is this view controller.h and view controller.m, which means what you said effectively is this view controller.h and .m should confirm to the two protocols, right? What are the two protocols? The data source protocol, let me take you back to the connection, to the data source protocol and the delegate. So your data source and delegate, if you are telling it's in view controller, now this view controller should confirm to these protocols. What are those? UITableView data source protocol and UITableView delegate protocol, right? That is what you are telling. So where should you confirm, or where should you write the two where should you confirm to the two is in this view controller. In other words, this view controller in the identity inspector is connected to, so in other words, it should be written inside this class view controller, which is these two files, view controller.h, view controller.m. Hope you understand how the things are getting connected. Now let me do a small experiment, right? So now what I'm going to do is, without confirming to the two protocols, I'm going to run this and show it to you now, right? So if I run this now, right? If I run this, right, this one, let's run this and see what's going to happen, right? I'm getting exception, right? So what is this exception, right? It says, if you look to the top, it says unrecognized selector, right? View controller, UITableView controller, right? See, number of rows in section, number of rows. Now, if you look at our previous lessons before this, which is a prerequisite, you will recall that number of rows in section, because you have to specify how many rows are in each section, right? You have to specify it, right? Now I didn't specify it so far, right? So why am I getting this error is because I have already told to the table view that, right, in my connections inspector I have told, okay, your data source and delegate is in this. So once again, if I remove it, right, if I delete the two, now I'm not telling the data source and delegate is here, right? So after removing it, if I run this once again, right, if I run this once again after removing it, right, okay, so I'm not getting any error. But the thing is, though I'm not getting any error, now I can't give data, right? I can't give the data. So to give the data, I had to write the data source method, right? And then to write the events, I had to write the delegate methods. So that is why I have to do this, right? I have to do what I did earlier, right? So I have to click on the table view. I have to go to the, if you're in activity inspector, you go to the connection inspector. Then you have to, what I did earlier is what I'm doing again. You have to connect it to the view controller to say that it's in your view controller, and the delegate also you connect and say you are going to write it in the view controller, right? But now you will get that runtime exception, because though you are telling your data source and delegate is in the view controller, though you are telling, you have not confirmed to the protocol, right? That is why you are getting this errors. So now you have to confirm that class, that view controller class, to the two protocols, right? So what are the two protocols, right? So if I go into this back, right? So what are the two protocols, right? So we have discussed, look at the previous lessons in this series, right? The two protocols is UITableView data source protocol and the UITableView delegate protocol, right? So these are the two protocols I have to confirm to, right? So how do you confirm to the protocols, right? So once again, if you don't know about protocols, look at our previous lessons in this series about the protocols, right? Awesome, right? So okay, so now let's go and confirm. So what I have to do is I have to go to the view controller and say, okay, I'm going to confirm to the UITableView data source protocol. Not only that, I'm also going to confirm this time for the delegate protocol, because most of the time when you do table views, you have to give the data plus then you have to do the events. So if you want to do the click events and stuff like that, you will say that you are going to confirm into the UITableView delegate as well. Awesome, right? Now let's try to compile and see what's going to happen, right? Or let's try to run straight away. Let's try to run with this, right? And it says build succeeded, right? Let's say, but still when I run, right? Still when I run, right? Let's see the errors, right? These are runtime. Once again, number of rows in section, right? So now you have to say how many rows in the section. Not only that, you have to say how many sections are there, right? So you remember our previous lessons in this series, right? So you have to do them in the order, otherwise you will not understand this clearly. So what you do now is you